Hello fellow button mashers, it's Jazzy. Hollow Knight Silksong released this past Thursday, and it feels really strange to say that. This has got to be one of the most anticipated indie game sequels in, like, the history of indie games. And the development of Silksong has spanned at least 6 years. Then 2 weeks ago, they drop a release trailer, and now it's here. I had no idea what to expect from the sequel to one of the most iconic platformers ever to be developed, but considering the development time and the quality of the original, it was really difficult to temper my expectations. I fully expected this game to be fantastic. And on Thursday, we started our first run of Silksong. As of this video, I'm about 9.5 hours into the game. Enough time to get a sense of the game progression, the battle system, and the world design. So I wanted to briefly cover what the experience has been like so far, and give some early thoughts about how the game plays. I might give another assessment after playing through the whole thing, and it'll be interesting to see if anything I say here changes later in the game. So let's get started. Here is a review of the Silksong early game. First thing I want to discuss is the story. Now, Silksong starts off in a different kingdom than in Hollow Knight. So the map is completely different, and there's no connection to Hallownest so far. The story, from what I've seen, does not appear to rely so much on the events of the first game, and I have yet to see any reference to the original story. So to the question of, should you play Hollow Knight for the story before Silksong? I mean, it's chronologically sequential, but if you play Silksong first, you're not gonna be lost in the story because of lore references to the first game. Unless a bunch of it is coming later in the game, which is totally possible. Regardless, this is really Hornet's story, and while I did play Hollow Knight, I also get the sense that story-wise, this game can be enjoyed on its own. Now, that isn't to say there are other good reasons to start with the first game, but I'll get to that in a minute. I appreciate that Hornet is not a silent protagonist in Silksong. She's beautifully voice acted and has some very charming and meaningful interactions with the residents of Farloom. She's definitely more than a passive observer. She becomes a very important figure in the lives of these people. I definitely feel more attached to her character than I ever felt to the original protagonist. Now, let's talk about Hornet's skill set. Her movement abilities are different in a few ways. The first big difference I noticed is her downward attack in the air, which is more of a diagonal thrust. It's a really interesting choice for Hornet because it makes her dodging abilities a lot more versatile. You can jump around enemies more quickly, and you can close the gap between them faster. This skill also makes for a unique challenge with the parkour areas where you have these cushions to bounce off of, but you need to aim your attacks downward and diagonally. And the angle at which you hit the cushion affects the direction you bounce off of it. So it's a bit more nuanced than just attacking down and bouncing back up. The progression of movement skills that Hornet unlocks seem parallel to the progression of the original game, with a couple nice variations thrown in. For example, one of the first skills you get is the dash, and in addition to being able to dash mid-air, the skill also lets you run quicker on the ground. You just have to be careful because it's less safe than walking and it takes a second to stop. This has been really nice for covering ground that has already been explored, and it's definitely preferable to bunny hopping with the dash. Speedrunners are gonna love it. The second skill you get is a cloak that lets you ride upward drafts of wind, but you can also balloon out your cloak and just Mary Poppins safely to the ground from any height. You don't take fall damage, but it is nice knowing if you're heading towards a spike floor or if there's a ledge that you want to check out on the way down. All in all, I think the movement skills are sufficiently unique. They add some nice quality of life to the experience of exploring the world, but they also fill the same need as the original skills did of unlocking new areas to access. Now let's talk about the battle system. In the original game, you got charms, but in Silksong you get tools. These can be equipped onto a crest, which will have certain slots to accommodate certain types of tools. Your first crest comes with one slot for each category of tool, and you can use a special item to add more slots. Most of the skills add passive benefits, but the attack tools are really cool because they add expendable attack abilities such as throwing knives that get replenished by resting at a bench. So yeah, between the throwing knives, the darting around enemies, and flipping off their heads, this game really does give Bug Ninja Sim energy. You can find different crests which offer a variety of basic attacks and new configurations of tool slots. I've only found one other crest so far, but I hear that a few of them have some especially useful passive skills like regen. It's a cool upgrade system. Definitely more complex than the charm system. But one thing I've noticed is I haven't yet encountered a big variety of tools in Silksong, especially compared to the amount of charms you can find in Hollow Knight. I'm hoping that I can find more with all the bulletin board side quests, but generally speaking, it doesn't seem like you get as much of a variety with passive skills. And maybe that was by design. But even the crests by default only allow one of each type of skill, and then you're restricted within each type based on the slots you have available. It just feels like less of a variety of builds so far. Maybe that will change later, we'll see, but I guess I was hoping for a bit more. Now, Silksong's game progression for me seems to play very much like Hollow Knight. You're exploring a world, you're looking for bosses to fight, and skills to access more areas of the map. There is a new side quest system, which I can't tell how beneficial it is yet, but I like how formalized it is. Like, it makes me feel a lot less like I'm just wandering aimlessly around the kingdom until I find something cool to do. Typically, I've had a concrete destination, and I really like that. That isn't to say that there are not so many routes to take. Every time another player shares their experience of the game, it sounds completely different from what I've experienced, and I love that. They've killed bosses that I haven't, and I found some tools that they haven't. One important difference in the progression of Silksong is that it feels like more difficult paths become available to you much earlier. Thinking about Hollow Knight, it just felt a bit more linear, and the higher difficulty areas were typically locked behind some mobility skill, so you were less likely to encounter those areas early on. Silksong doesn't seem as worried about keeping you out of dangerous places, which can be a cool thing, but it also confused me a bit when suddenly I was getting my butt kicked against enemy after enemy that were slamming me for 2 points of damage almost every attack. And once you start clearing, the game incentivizes you to continue clearing because you leave all your money behind when you die. Some of the boss routes felt a bit lengthy, as in, distance from bench to boss could sometimes feel unnecessarily long, especially when there was any parkour involved or a lot of enemies to fly through just to get back to the fight. I felt this especially in gauntlet-style fights where a boss room would come at the end of a lot of precision jumping. I was hoping to see a few more benches closer to boss rooms in Silksong, but all in all, I'd say the boss routes are, if anything, a bit longer than the original game. In general, Silksong definitely feels more challenging than Hollow Knight. Even early bosses were giving me a run for my money, especially since so many of their attacks hit for 2 points of damage, and Hornet starts with only 5 health. So you really can't take a lot of hits in these fights. And this seems like a good time to mention the healing mechanic. You can only heal with a full spool of silk, which will heal you for 3 points. You can heal anywhere, including in midair, which is nice. However, you are locked into the animation once you initiate the heal. So if you time it badly, you lose an entire spool of thread at once. It's actually very punishing. With the right timing, it does save some time in boss fights, but it incentivizes waiting to heal until you lose 3 points of health, at which point you are probably 1 hit away from death. I think I really like the extra challenge. The healing is higher risk and higher reward, and generally tougher to pull off. It is infuriating getting a heal interrupted by a boss with lightning fast attacks, and I am having so much fun. But if you want an easier game, you're probably better off with the original. That isn't to say Hollow Knight is easy. I have yet to experience the entire game, but for the most part, I do think Silksong is going to be another masterpiece. It hits all the points for me. Dynamic fighting, gorgeous world building, stunning OST, tough as nails bosses, and that unmistakable feeling of wonder every time I step into a Hollow Knight biome for the first time. Silksong still feels like a game of the franchise, and I would have never asked for anything different. At the same time, it adds a lot of variety to the battle and movement systems, enemy and boss design, and the feel of the world. So it will still be a very unique experience to any player. I cannot recommend this game enough, especially if you are a glutton for pain and you happen to think that you're good at Hollow Knight games. That's it for the early review. I'll try to get out another one of these after I finish the game. In the meantime, I will be streaming it plenty over on Twitch. Come over and experience the game with us. We'd love to have you. Thanks again, and see you next time.